Graduate School of Dentistry, and she holds a PhD from Michigan State University. She's a developmental psychologist whose research focuses on the ways in which race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status influence parenting beliefs, practices, and child outcomes, particularly among African American, Latino, and Euro-American children. Some of her recent and ongoing work include the Project Alliance, which is a multi-ethnic study of parental involvement in education, and the Middle School Transition Study, which is focused on how family and classroom context shapes students' sense of self as they transition to middle school. So with that, I would like to, without further ado, welcome our speaker. Thank you, Gail. It's a pleasure to be here. Can people hear me in the back? Okay, good. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I am going to talk about our new project, which is neither of the middle school projects that I have been working on. As I like to say as a developmentalist, my sample grew up, and so I'm going to talk about high school today. Yay, for some people, maybe not for others. So I'm going to talk about envisioning a meaningful future, perceptions of the economy that adolescents have. And sometimes we think adolescents, they're kind of in their own mind. They aren't really thinking about the world out there. They might be thinking about the economy as it affects their own family life, so they might be aware of their own family socioeconomic status. But we don't really know a lot about the extent to which adolescents think about the job market and the economy as they are forward-looking post-high school. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the setting of this project first, and then I'm going to tell you some of the theoretical motivations of prior research, and then I'm going to present some new findings for you that are currently under review but are not quite out yet. And so this study is embedded in a research practice partnership. And I set this out at first because this isn't one of my typical studies where I kind of go in with some ideas and prior research and theory and have an idea of what I want to look at, and I kind of collaborate with the school and collect data, and then I have some findings. This happened completely differently. This is a research practice partnership where we co-develop the goals of the research project together with the school district focused on problems of practice. This is a project where not only do I collect data, but we have graduate students in the school conducting interventions. We are their point person whenever they want to know the answer to something before they go to their school board, and they want to know what the research says about homework, as they're already deciding that they're going to change the policy without having looked at the research, but what would I say about it? And we bring their students into our classroom. I teach a course on adolescent development, and our students in this master's level class solve a problem of practice for the school district. It is a true research practice partnership. And the goal of the partnership, and what the principal and the superintendent came to me and said, we want to solve for improving academic engagement and achievement among their students of color. As he looks down the hallway, he can see students that are not engaged. He can kind of muse about who these students are, but he wanted to know who are they, and can we close gaps in engagement. He and his guidance department wanted to improve college and career readiness and college access. This is a lower middle working class community where approximately, I think, 60% of their graduating class will go on to some form of post-secondary education, either 2-year college or 4-year college. The rest go into some other form of something, which is what they're worried about. And how do they prepare their students? They see, their guidance department sees a good portion of their students who get access or are accepted into college but melt over the summer because there's no one there to kind of bridge that long 11-week gap from graduation day to you're supposed to show up in college and move into the dorm with all of your things together and you know what to bring and all. And so something happens over the summer financially, or otherwise they don't show up in college. Second thing that happens is they see that they wanted some solutions on this, that after the first year of college, there is a significant dropout of students after the first year. And as they see it, that there are kids that colleges are really good at giving a first year financial package. They're not so good at giving the second year financial package. And so unless kids know why and have a means for enabling themselves to continue in that second and alternate years, they have trouble with college access beyond the first year. So they wanted to identify ways that the schools and families can support youth, and we were focusing on sense of purpose, future orientation, and advocacy, really trying to equip students to succeed and prepare for the transition post-high school. I was just meeting with the guidance department last week, and they've been doing this intervention program, which we've been working on together. And the guidance department said, I just want every kid in my school to have a path into the middle class. Doesn't matter if they go to college or not, but have a path in the middle class. And he defined that as within 10 years of high school graduation, they will be making $37,000 a year. Median family income based on the census. And how do they do that? So if you go to a local two-year college, he knows, if you go there without a plan to transfer out of there, the average student who graduates from the local two-year college that's down the road that they have a partnership with is not making $37,000 by the time the student is 27. And so that's his concrete way of how to think about that. And so we wanted to understand how students think about their future, how they think about society, and how we can support them in that. So this is the broad setting that it's a research practice partnership, and I wanted to emphasize that from the front. And I'm happy to answer questions about logistics of doing a partnership, either as part of this talk or lunch or drinks or it's a complex animal, both getting it funded, because you're not asking a funding agency to fund your idea, you're asking them to fund you while you develop ideas and develop practice. I'm happy to answer questions about that later. And I'm also happy to be interrupted and ask me questions along the way. I have a set of slides I can get to, but I'm also happy to take rabbit trails and not talk about some slides that are on there that I thought I would talk about. I'm more interested in what you guys want to talk about, so feel free to interrupt. My aims for today, we can get to all of them or not, is to examine a broader conceptualization of aspirations focused on sense of purpose, which builds off of Bill Damon's work, which is different from this kind of aspiration, and it's really kind of what drives you to be you. What were you born to do? So it's different from aspirations where kids know that when you ask them if they want to go to college, they all know the right answer, and they will all tell you they want to go. They don't necessarily know why they want to go. And some kids don't go to college. I mean, only 30% of the U.S. population has a four-year college degree. So what are the other 70% doing? Many of them are doing exactly what they're supposed to do, right in the center of their sense of purpose. How do we help them develop this sense of purpose? With a future orientation, influenced by some of Nermi's work, which is really kind of being planful about the future, imagining a future. And then we're also examining this in the context of perceptions that students have about the future. How insecure are they about the job market? How aware are they of unemployment? How aware are they of the burden of student loan debt? How do they think they could get a job if they just worked hard at it, or do they think it's luck? And kids can recount the person that they know in their community who graduated from college and is still working the job that they were working while they were in college, only now they're doing it with $100,000 worth of debt. They will recount that in the guidance department and then say, why would I go to college? And we're saying, fair question. Let's talk about it. And so this work also relates to other people's work, like Ariel Khalil, industry inventor, and Krolnick, and others that have looked at not just financial strain and financial stress, as you kind of think about Rand Conger's model, where financial stress in the family is associated with child mental health problems. In Conger's model, it's largely because it disrupts the family context. You have more arguments and conflict over money, which disrupts parents' ability to be consistent parents. And then Ariel Khalil's work has shown, well, actually, you can look at a path model where you have the kids' understanding of financial stress, and it relates to their own experiences of financial stress, which then undermine down the way. And Mystery's work has shown that as well, looking at its relationship to achievement rather than mental health. But Rolnick Wendy Gromick at Clark and others have looked at this. It's not just what they're actually experiencing, financial stress, it's also their perceptions. You know, the unemployment rate isn't all that bad in the community which we work, but they believe that it's unpredictable. And so what we're looking at is whether or not students actually perceive the job market to be unstable or insecure. And in Wendy Goldnick's work, she has shown that parents' perceptions of the job market, quite apart from their own experiences with job loss or financial stress, their perceptions of the insecurity and stability of the job market for their kids changes how they parent. If they feel like the job market is insecure and unstable, they are much more controlling and much more exacting than they are when they have low levels of insecurity. And so we are bringing this down to kids and saying, well, how is this affecting how kids are doing? And so as adolescence development is still primarily based on relational support and primarily in school context and family context, we're looking at those two contexts as they shape adolescents' sense of purpose, envisioning a meaningful future, and their perceptions of the job market. So those are the aims for today. So our research questions are parents in school-based relationships related to envisioning a meaningful future, which is a combination of this sense of purpose and a future orientation? Does envisioning a meaningful future relate to their academic engagement? And these are adolescents, so we're not talking about behavioral engagement, where they're showing up at school and turning in their homework. We're talking about cognitive engagement, self-regulated learning. So are they being planful about their work? Are they engaged in their work in high cognitive ways? And how do students' perceptions of the job market relate to academic engagement? So those are the research questions for today. We'll see how far we get. So in my research thus far, I've been really thinking, I come from a psychology department. I spent 13 years in the psychology department before moving to a school of education. And so I've been looking at these kind of outcomes, not only looking at your basic academic achievement outcomes, grades, test scores, graduation rates. They're always in the data set. We're always looking at them. We're always also looking at mental health outcomes. But I've also been looking at, over the course of my career, at educational aspirations and career goals. What do people want to do when they grow up? You know, what are their aspirations? And I used to, code students' career goals based on occupational prestige and kind of looking at that in relation to parenting practices, looking at that in relation to how they're doing in school. And also looking at cognitive engagement or self-regulated learning, which is, it really comes into flower in adolescence because of their increased cognitive ability. So they have the ability to plan. They have the ability to mentally manipulate options and hypothesize what will happen if they pursue these options before they pursue them. And to understand kind of broader purposes of their current experiences. They're in the middle, as you know, of identity development. So how are they thinking about their career goals and their schoolwork in the context of their broader identity development? And so the first study I'm going to show you, which isn't part of the partnership, but where we really looked at this kind of co-relationship of aspirations and engagement and achievement to kind of say, which comes first? Do you have this idea of what you want to be and then you pursue it? Kind of social cognitive theory kind of based. And so we looked at this as, do engagement and aspirations function together? And there are two competing models, you might argue. One is you have parents, you have post-high school outcomes or placement, are they in college or not? And then you have, this says school engagement and achievement, I'm sorry you can't see that, and aspirations. So you have this engagement in school, and then as they get towards the end of the school, they develop these aspirations, and then they use those aspirations that drive them to post-high school placement. And so you have the school engagement followed by aspirations. Or do aspirations come first and drive engagement and give meaning to schoolwork so they understand why they're doing the schoolwork, why buckle down and study algebra? I mean, what teen do you know is like, what's the meaning of this? They will tell you they don't want to do algebra because, what's the purpose in it? There's no purpose in it. And we're suggesting that maybe it's this model where the aspirations and the purpose come first, and that drives the meaning of the engagement, which then leads to post-high school outcomes. And so we tested this model with the Maddox data set, which is Jackie Epel's data set that was collected in Prince George's County. She's been following this old data, but she's been following these kids for 100 years, and the data is public access. And so it's beautiful data in which to look at this, because she has data from 7th grade to 3 years post high school. We used all of it. And we tested this model. And we found that there were significant reciprocal relations, but there were stronger relationships from aspirations to engagement. So I'm going to show you this complex model. I'm going to highlight a couple of pathways for you. And then I'm going to show you a model where I'm going to tell you what I really think it means. So you ready? Here we go. See, I prepared you for it, didn't I? Didn't I? I did. I did. I did. Didn't I? So we have 7th grade here. I'm going to walk you through it. Parent monitoring, provision of autonomy, warm. This is at 7th grade. End of 8th grade, we have GPA, and then we have educational aspirations, and we have engagement, and then we have these same variables in 11th grade, and then enrollment in college post-high school. We controlled for all of the things over there, over here, for 1,452 students. Here's what I want you to pay attention to. There were significant reciprocal relationships, so you can see that GPA affects aspirations and the other way around. We control for the stability of each of these variables across time points. But what we found was that the pathways from aspirations to each of the engagement and achievement variables were stronger than the other way around. And I'll show you what I mean in a minute, because this was moderated. So it's not that it doesn't work where the engagement shapes aspirations, but the relationship from aspirations to engagement was stronger. The other thing, because I study parenting, I can't help but to point this out, is that when you look at monitoring, autonomy granting, and warmth. Warmth is related to everything, because all parents with all over the world love their kids, and they're warm towards them in the ways that they know how to be. But monitoring is something that you typically see higher levels of for African Americans. African Americans tend to be more authoritarian, they tend to have higher levels of control and monitoring, and what we know from prior research is that it works. It's associated with higher levels of achievement. And guess what? It is. And it's more strongly related to GPA for the blacks than it is for the whites. And the beauty of the Maddox sample is that it was collected in Prince George's County, Maryland, at a time where they had a large range of middle-class African Americans. So these middle-class African Americans, this African American sample runs the range of socioeconomic status. But provision of autonomy was related to the aspirations and engagement, but is not related to red lines, not related to GPA. Parent monitoring, sorry, my button's confusing. Parent monitoring helps kids do well in terms of getting good grades. It helps them with behavioral engagement. It means they show up to class, they do their homework, they do what they're told. And it's stronger for blacks than it is for whites. And it's more weakly related to the other kinds of engagement. But autonomy granting is related to GPA only for the white students and not for the black students. So I'm just going to pause here for a minute, because I don't want to pause on this study to go into other things I want to show you. But what I take away from this for the African American sample is that we know that these high control parenting practices help, in part because they keep kids safe, and they keep them on the straight and narrow in a school where they're going to be discriminated against, where their teacher is biased against them. If they show up and do their homework, that's great. But if they act outside of the box, which is what autonomy granting allows, then we don't allow them to do that. Because if they act outside of the box, they're likely to get discriminated against. When you look at the disciplinary data, there's significant and consistent data that they get deeper consequences for the same infractions. And so they learn not to misbehave. They stay right in the straight and narrow behavior engagement, and they don't get the benefit of what adolescents really do. So I'm just going to pause there. It's not what my talk's about. I can't show this slide without showing it. We're talking about that. So the other thing that was interesting around the this bidirectional relationship between aspirations and engagement is that we tested it across students' prior academic achievement. So did they come into this study, into middle school, with high levels of achievement or low levels of achievement? And we tested the moderating effect, and it was significant. And here's the less complex picture, where you'll get to see what it looks like. So for kids who enter middle school with above average grades, so they're not worried about their grades. And how we split the sample was we looked at extremes. The kids who we called above average of achievement, they are more than a half a standard deviation above the mean. Those who are low levels of achievement are more than a half a standard deviation below the mean, and we sliced out the middle so that we could get the extremes. So for kids who are above average in grades, parents and teachers should help them create buy-in in developing their goals because it worked this way. The parenting practices help them develop these goals, so the pathway going this way from aspirations to engagement was stronger for them. And in contrast, for kids entering middle school but with below average grades, the pathway worked this way. So for kids who are not, I'm sorry, you're leaning in the back, let me tell you. Parenting was related to this engagement coming first, and engagement in relation to aspirations. So the pathway from 8th grade engagement to 11th grade aspirations was stronger than the other way around. So for kids who are coming in with questions about their ability to succeed academically into middle school, they actually have to see to believe. They actually have to see and try out what their schoolwork in order to imagine that they can achieve and imagine going to college. Whereas the opposite is true for kids who are doing well in school. They're doing well in school, they've nailed school. Now, developing meaning around school is something that they're ready for, rather than, gosh, can I master this thing that's in front of me? And so we were looking at this kind of relationship between aspirations and engagement. And again, here, aspirations is really about, how far do kids want to go? How far in school do they want to go? What do they want to be when they grow up? Fill in the blank with a job title, which is different than what we're looking at today. But I wanted to give you this by way of background. So today, what we're really looking at this is envisioning a meaningful future. So it's not just about wanting to go to college or wanting to do the fill-in-the-blank career goal. It's how do we help adolescents create meaning in their life and connect themselves to something that's both meaningful to them personally and is something bigger than themselves and contributes to the society, which is Bill Damon's definition of sense of purpose. So personally meaningful benefits to society, and as they think about that, how do they think about that as it relates to their future? And so we call this envisioning a meaningful future, and it includes both sense of purpose and future orientation together, and you'll see this will be a latent construct in our future here. Let me stop for a minute and breathe and let you react to it or soak it in, ask some questions. Yes?
Going back to the aspirations, the autonomy. What domains were parents allowing students to be autonomous or not?
So in that measure, that's like I said, that's from Jackie Eccles' data set. It's really kind of Larry Steinberg-esque parental autonomy. So giving kids, the chance to make decisions for themselves in a kind of broad domains. And so it's really a broader parenting practice. In our own work with Project Alliance, where we developed a framework for family school engagement and parental involvement in education for adolescents, we, from our focus groups, emerged a construct that we called scaffolding independence around schoolwork. And we did a discriminate convergent validity test with general parental autonomy granting as it relates to achievement, and they are different constructs. So this is a more general parent autonomy scale. What you're going to see in my subsequent work that I'm going to present today is scaffolding independence around schoolwork, which is really about parents letting kids figure out the schoolwork themselves, scaffolding them and getting help on their schoolwork, letting them plan for their schoolwork, sometimes letting them fail at something. It's really interesting to talk to teachers about this, because teachers want the homework done. Done, because it's part of their pedagogy. And they can't continue on if the kids haven't done the homework. And parents sometimes come at it, listen, I worked all night trying to get you to get that homework done. You're just going to have to suffer the consequence of the failing grade. And that's a parenting strategy to teach a lesson that's at odds with what the teacher's trying to do, because they're trying to get the content in, and the parent's trying to teach responsibility, which is why parents and teachers should talk sometime. Right? They're all about the same goal, but they're going at it in somewhat different ways. So that's a long answer to it. This is a general parent autonomy measure that you see in a lot of the literature on parenting and adolescence, which is different from kind of an autonomy around schoolwork. Yeah.
How were you assessing aspirations in that?
In that study, we asked them, I think it was like something like 3 or 4 questions about how far they wanted to go in school, how likely they think that they would achieve that, which is kind of getting at this kind of pie in the sky. Oh yeah, I'm going to go to college. Do you really think you're going to get there? No. And in that space, there's development. So we asked both of those kinds of questions, and then we asked them what their career goals were. Okay. So here's the larger theoretical model for our partnership. So again, those data work for the partnership. Now I'm going to talk about our real partnership work. So the theoretical model that we co-developed with the school, they are very interested in school engagement. They're obviously interested in school achievement, but they're really interested in post-secondary outcomes and where kids are going. We came at this and said, well, we really want to look at sense of purpose and future orientation, in part because of what we know about the aspirations and engagement literature that we've both been reading and contributing to. And then the 2 primary contexts that kids find themselves are at school and at home, and then we were also looking at some of their inner resources. And so this is the broader general model. We're looking at some congruence between the home and school context, but in the data I'm going to present to you today, we're really looking at these separate constructs. So within this larger model, we've been collecting survey data with the entire student population. We're very, very fortunate to get passive parental consent because we convinced our IRB that if we're going to look at student engagement, and if we could only look at the kids whose parents signed a paper when they're 16 years old, we were not going to get the sample of kids that we really wanted to look at who were disengaged. They bought it. And we asked fairly benign questions. They reviewed our survey, and we got buy-in from the parent site, decision-making body. We got permission from the school board. We got permission all the way down the line, and it enabled us to actually collect survey data from every kid in the school. And we have 3 waves of data, and in 1 month and 6 days, we're going to get our 4th wave of data. We are very excited. We will have followed 270 kids over the course of their high school. And we're very excited about this. I'm going to present wave 1 data today. So in this model, we're going to look today at this part of the model where engagement is our outcome, because remember that's what you're really interested in, our principal and our superintendent. And then we're going to look at this pathway. So looking at sense of purpose, school context. We have lots of school context variables today. We're going to talk about school belonging and teacher-student relationships. We're going to look at parenting variables. We're going to look at sense of purpose, school engagement. We're also going to look at their perceptions of the job market. So that's the theoretical, broader theoretical model. So why focus on parent and school relationships? Sometimes I get the question, why didn't you look at peer? Peer groups are so important, and they are. They really are. I study parenting, so this is what I bring to the table. My colleagues bring expertise in the sense of purpose, and we have a lot of graduate students in schools very interested in what they can do around teacher support. And I know enough about peer research to know we have to really do some social metric kind of data, and I couldn't figure out how to do that in high school in a way that satisfied me. I think you can do that really well when you have contained classrooms or when you know who is in a building, but when you have a school building of 1,200, not being a peer person, I couldn't figure out how to do that. Maybe next round. So why parents in schools? Parents, one, are the primary source of support, even for these teenagers who are running, literally running in the other direction. Parents still are the primary source of support, especially when it comes to post-secondary planning. They will talk to their friends about their soul. They will talk to their parents about getting into college. They will trust their parents about, what kind of job pathway is right, even if they bear their deepest intimacies to their friends. Among parents, we have developed this concept of academic socialization, which grew out of a meta-analysis with a doctoral student of mine, Diana Tyson, and I published in 2009, that we showed that this academic socialization was more strongly related to achievement than the typical family engagement variables of school involvement, homework involvement. We followed up that meta-analysis with a series of focus groups to develop a framework for family school engagement in adolescence, and that framework we are bringing forward into this high school study. So we're looking at linking education to the future, promoting scaffolding independence, which, back to your question, is different from autonomy, granting family support for education and parents' provision of educational advice. School-based relationships. We're looking at teachers' relationships with teachers. We have one of our doctoral students who's getting ready to graduate that did this beautiful model on teacher-student relationships using self-determination theory and how teachers, you don't have to be warm and fuzzy, but if you provide the basics such as opportunities to feel competent, feel related to, and a sense of autonomy, and a sense of belonging at school, that these are associated with greater optimism about the future and a greater sense of agency in prior work. So those are some of the reasons why we focus on parents and school-based relationships. So our sample is 1,150 diverse students. 61% are non-Hispanic white, with 18% African American and smaller Asian and Latino samples, which means we can make some comparisons between blacks and whites. My good sensibilities about culture will not allow me to look at a pan-ethnic minority group, unless we're really just looking at ethnic minority status. So we do some comparisons between blacks and whites. It's significant economic diversity. The median household income is $72,000 a year in this community, which in some communities is quite high. But if you've ever been to Boston and tried to live there, this isn't very much money. And so it really is a kind of lower middle class, working class community. The average housing price is something like $700,000 in this community. And these aren't many mansions, these are small homes on postage stamp properties. Among the posters, 23% are free and reduced, 28% are free and reduced price lunch. Post-high school plans, about 62% plan to attend a public year college, another 17% plan to attend a two-year college. In reality, about 60% walk out on graduation day with a admission to one of those two places. So that's the sample. I'll pause here for a second. Yeah.
What were the percentages of these students who are first gen? I'm just wondering.
First gen, oh gosh. I can't tell you. That's a good question. It seems like I knew that information last week because we talked about it as particularly as students melt over the summer. The students who are melting are first gen students. And the students who are melting that are first gen aren't necessarily ethnic minorities. One of the things that's really interesting, you see how I'm going on this tangent? Follow me for a minute and I'll come back. What's really interesting about this sample is that the things that I would often attribute to ethnic minority or immigrant status or something like that, because we have such a large working class white population, that some of those things that in my prior research I thought, okay, this is about being low income, not about being minority, which is why we have to disconnect the confound between being an ethnic minority and being low income, that a lot of these first-gen students are white working class families. And so it's not as easy to kind of discern who's first-gen and who's not. We do look at parents. In this sample, we did split, and you'll see it in a minute, between parents who have a college, kids whose parents have a college education and kids who don't, which isn't necessarily a good marker of first-gen, but for our data purposes, it worked out beautifully. Almost 50% of the population has a parent with a college degree, a parent with a college degree, and 50% do not. We did not plan that. We got the luck of the draw being in a community where you could do a split like that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that all the ones who don't have a parent with a college degree are first-gen. They may not be.
Is this across multiple schools, these data, or is this one?
This is one high school.
One different.
It's a sort of, well, by LA standards, it's not a big high school. As I understand it. Yeah.
Just curious if you had a significant population of foster youth or kids who are maybe not living with their parents?
We have, there's a very small sample of homeless youth, and then among, probably overrepresented in the ELL youth are people, or kids who are living with aunts and uncles because they immigrated by themselves or their parents went back or something like that.
And of the immigrant students, where are they coming from?
They are coming from all over. In the black sample, when we have a black sample, not an African American sample, there's a sizable Haitian population. Within the Latino sample, there's a sizable Brazilian population. And when we break out and just look at the Latinos, the Brazilian sample is the most disadvantaged, probably, of all of the ethnic minorities. And when we, for our adolescent development class, the principal wanted us to look at kind of improving family-school relationships for their ethnic minority population. So we did a quick, dive into the data to see what it looked like. And the Brazilians, he was worried about the Haitians. The Haitians weren't the ones that were most at risk. The Brazilians were. They were lowest on every indicator that we had. And so we kind of said to him, hey, we can focus on the Haitians, but let me tell you about the Brazilians. And he was like, Brazilians, let's do that. And so that's what we did. And I think it's in part because with the Brazilians, there's a large population of Portuguese and Brazilians in Boston, and I think they get lumped into the Hispanic category. There's a language difference there. And so, you talk about translation and things like that, and people forget that you have a sizable sample that speaks Portuguese. But we're calling them Latin. We're calling them Latinos. So I think that's part of the reason why they ended up being less well served in the population. So there's a large group from Brazil, a large group from Haiti, and then lots of people from different parts of Asia, Southeast Asia, and a good population from there among our small Asian population. And then we have, this is Boston. We have a large, deep population that are, Irish and Italian. And when I first started doing work in this community, I started doing work in their middle schools, and I'd ask them ethnic background, and I'd give them the choices that we usually do: white, black, Latino, or fill in. Italian American. It's like, okay, I get it. And so it's a different kind of cultural experience. Okay, so how do we make sense of the kind of constructs we're looking at across grade level? I'm just going to show you some mean differences across grade level. These are cross-sectional data, but they tend to be true also when we look at it across grades. These are 9th, 10th, and 11th graders. We don't have 12th graders in this particular sample because in this wave 1 data we didn't collect 12th graders. because they finished school a month before the 9th through 11th graders. And when we went in that first year, this is one of those, we talked about how to develop a partnership. We started framing this in December, and in January we were putting together measures and trying to get our IRB, and in March we were before the school board in the site-based decision-making committee, and by then we didn't think we could get data collected by May, and so we were going to collect it in June after the end of grade test so we wouldn't disrupt the learning period, and we went to the site-based committee and they said, do seniors! Like, we can't do seniors. We did 80 of them. And that was it, and that's all we could do. So in the first year data, we only had 9th through 11th graders, and now we very planfully collect seniors in May and we come back in June. Anyway, all that to say, this is the data on job market, what we call job market pessimism. And what we found was, and this is true year on year, even though these are cross-sectional data, 10th graders are really worried about the job market. 10th graders. 11th graders not so much, and when we looked in subsequent years, the 12th graders, they're elevated, but not as high as the 10th graders. Totally surprised us. We thought this is just a crazy year, and then it shows up year on year. The scale, it's a mean on a 6-point scale. So you know, it's significantly different, and practically different. I don't know. Significantly different, yes. And that's how I feel about all of these I'm getting ready to show you. So we can parse scales, and we can. I don't know if they're meaningfully different. They're significantly different. They're significantly different year on year. And I thought, why 10th grade? And
I have a question.
go.
I'm Italian American from Boston. And
Okay! So you know, it's a cultural group.
I had my first job when I was 16, which I think is 10th grade. So a lot of people start working at 16, right?
Yeah. So we took it back to the students. Because it made no sense to us. We're like, oh, the closer you get to graduation is when you should. But before I explain, because I was getting ready to explain, I have to show you the rest of the data, and then I'll tell you what our explanation is. You can tell me if you think it's right. When we look at college-going efficacy, which is a scale that we sum up, because that's the way the designers do it. Freshman year, oh yeah, it is. The closer you get to it, reality hits a less efficacious. Our colleague, who is a good friend of mine and a co-faculty member, who trains our guidance counselors, runs them. She's like, oh my gosh, this is supposed to be going up and not down. And it's also possible that the closer you get to reality, the more you realize you don't know how to do it. But when you're a freshman, oh yeah, this is this difference between aspirations and expectations. But we're also seeing it with well-being and school importance. And school importance is how important is school for reaching your future goals. So our hypothesis, which is given to us by the students themselves, because what we also do is this is a partnership. We run analyses, we muse about analyses, and then we went back to the seniors with these data in the cafeteria on rounder tables and said, this is what we have. You have big poster white paper on your table in groups of 10. Write what you think is going on. And then we took it back. We also asked them to tell us what they think the school is doing well, what they should be doing more of, and they told us those things as well. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't read the x-axis on the top left.
Top left, that's well-being scale. I think it goes up to 50, and it's a sum. This is well-being, this is full importance, scarcity, instability, college-going efficacy. The numbers are, this one here is an average. It goes from 0 to 5. The well-being goes, I think, from 10 to 50. This one goes up to 60. So again, significant difference. They're significant as we do subsequent ways. Our hypothesis, our explanation, this can't be a hypothesis post hoc. Our post hoc explanation in subsequent testing was around what's happening in 10th grade. The other thing that they said in 10th grade was that they're least likely to know who their guidance counselor is, and they're least likely to see their guidance counselor. And when we asked the guidance department, they said, oh yeah, well that makes total sense because we spend a lot of time on 9th graders getting them transitioned to high school, and we spend a lot of time with the 11th and 12th graders transitioning them out. But during 10th grade, a bunch of things happen, and this is what our undergraduates told us. At 10th grade, we start working, and so now we have a better sense of the market, and we're also working, we're getting a little money, and we're judging whether or not school is worth it. They are taking the 10th grade, end of grade standardized test for the final time as a graduation requirement, as the state requires it. MCAS. And so you have to pass the MCAS in 10th grade, or you have to pass the 10th grade MCAS test before you graduate. So if you don't pass it in 10th grade, that's Q. And you take it again in 11th and 12th grade, and you can't graduate till you pass it. You become eligible for dropout. For the first time, many of the best students are taking the PSAT for the first time. So now, for the first time, they're getting a cue of how they stand with other 10th graders across the nation, and they didn't know this before. And they have either found themselves eligible to take AP courses, honors courses, or not. So you have all of these reality check, am I good enough stuff, am I on track for what my 9th grade aspirations are stuff, happening in 10th grade when guidance department isn't paying any attention.
And when there's a big biological spurt in maturation of the amygdala, connection of prefrontal cortex, which makes you more likely to be anxious, more likely to ruminate, and more susceptible to loneliness and feeling disconnected.
Oh my gosh. You didn't tell me that at breakfast. We were talking again before the day is over. But so that's happening in 10th grade. And in response to that, I'm trying to watch my time. Oh, this is ends at 1, right? Okay, I'm going to keep going. The guidance department changed their practices. That's a quick and dirty answer. And they spend a concerted effort focusing on the 10th graders, hanging out within the cafeteria, getting to know them, so that they are not doing this by themselves. Okay, in the interest of time, we're going to keep going. Even if I don't get through it all, it's okay. So cross-ethnic background, Blacks and Asians, significantly higher on the job market scarcity and instability. What I want to point out here is that the African Americans and the Asians score, and the Latinos score high on having a commitment to a sense of purpose, so they know why they're here, more so than the whites. But this is the interesting disconnect. The African Americans have a higher, significantly higher than whites on their sense of purpose, but lower on their engagement around purpose. They know why they're here. They know their sense of purpose to a greater degree, but they're not pursuing it. They haven't figured out a way how to get the wheels to hit the road and pursue their purpose. You're like, oh my gosh, that's an intervention right there. And then they have, this is even less probably practically significant, but the educational goals, the minorities score higher. So then we wanted to test the model. So we tested the model, family support. This is a scaffolding linking education to the future and provision of educational advice, school belonging, teacher-student relationships, significantly related to a meaningful future. And having a sense of a meaningful future, remember that sense of purpose and a future orientation was positively related to self-regulated learning and cognitive strategy use, so cognitive engagement. The direct relationship between family support and engagement was not significant. We tested the model with and without the direct effects to test the indirect effects, and a model with the direct effects fit better, and this was the final model. We tested it between African Americans and whites using a multi-group, and we found that school relationships, as it relates to meaningful future, is stronger for African Americans than for whites. Remember, we can compare the whites and the African Americans, but not the other minority groups. However, the link between having a meaningful future and engagement was stronger for whites. And so if you remember that mean difference between the low levels of engagement for African Americans and their sense of purpose, you see it here. So this relationship between meaningful future and engagement is is stronger for whites than for blacks. But it's the school context that has a stronger relationship for developing a sense of purpose and having a future orientation compared for blacks compared to whites.
So this is really interesting to me because we are doing this service learning project. And I've assigned, it's in my African American Child Development class. And so I've assigned students to different contexts. Some are in a reading program in elementary school, some are in high school, and some are in preschool. And so we're finding the elementary school black students, I mean, bursting with excitement and incredible engagement around, you know, the reading and their reading comprehension. You're like, I love reading. They're coming early to the program. Can I start early? By the time we get to the high school students, we have them complaining about not being challenged. They're experiencing all kinds of discrimination, and so they're like, I'm really interested in this topic, but they're less engaged because the teachers just one by one, the messages that they give them around their ability, just like it seems like they're beating the spirit out of them one by one, day by day, right?
Yes!
It's you know, I could cry over what we're seeing.
So where I have seen that is not only what you're describing with the students. I cringed because I saw this with the African American parents and the African American focus groups in the middle school setting. It was as if they were holding back the world to create a safe space for their kids to grow up in, because all of the negative experiences around them are pressing in on them. The white kids and the white parents did not talk about the peer group when I asked them about parenting, because I didn't ask them about the peer group when I asked them about parenting. The Latinos and the African Americans talked about, oh, I can't be in the hallway with these certain people because if they get in trouble, I get in trouble too. I'm just swept up with them. And they know that their teachers, they see that their teachers treat them differently and don't call them there. And they have to stay connected even though they feel marginalized. Which is why feeling like you belong and having a teacher in the school that cares is going to do wonders for a kid who feels beaten down and marginalized by the school. Yeah.
Just following up what you're saying and what she said, I also feel earlier in your slides when you spoke about for the African American students, they have a support system at home with their parents. But then as a parent myself, I can see the transition from the support system that you get with the teachers, the counselors, and the parents from middle school, or elementary school actually, to middle school. There's a complete disconnect.
Right, and what happens particularly with high achieving African American and Latino kids is not always the discrimination in the classroom. If they're in the AP classes, they're part of the smart group and the teachers know it. It's not what happens in the classroom. It's what happens to those kids in the hallway by the teacher who doesn't know that they're an AP student in a school of 1,000. Right? And so that's part of what happens too. It's like it's not just what's happening in the classroom, it's what happens when they get in trouble in the hallway for having a cell phone, which is a violation in the school. We're working on the policy and we're collecting data from them on this. That's an aside, I don't want to go there because I want to show you these job market findings before my time runs out. 6 minutes, I can do it in less than 6 minutes. I'm going to show them, and I'm not going to say anything. So job markets, we looked at views of the job market. I have to show you the slide, so you have kids that are getting on the school bus. How can we get retrained? Well, we never got trained in the first place because they're hearing this in the marketplace, and you have to get retrained. I have to show you that. Okay, so what we found was parent relationships were not related to job market pessimism, but school relationships are. And that job market pessimism was related to engagement, but only when the direct effects were not in the model. So we had this kind of suppression effect that we decided to tease out by looking at a latent interaction term between parent relationship and job market pessimism. So what we did was we looked at this latent interaction of parent support and job market pessimism as it relates to school achievement. And this model with the latent interaction term fit better than the model that I just showed you. So then we looked at whether or not it varied across ethnicity and across parent education level. And I'm going to show you the parent education level. The team's views on the, well, I'm not going to show you that yet. I'm going to show you how the interaction worked first, across the interaction worked, which is interesting. So at high levels of job market pessimism, the parenting practices, which I've spent my career saying that they're positively related to engagement, only if. If they have high levels of job market pessimism, then those same parenting practices is associated with negatively with school engagement. So if they're afraid about the job market and their parents are, and this makes total sense. This conversation happened in my house. High markets of job market pessimism, and I'm like linking their education to the future, giving them educational advice because I'm the expert. Checked out. So the combination, and the parents, we ask these parents, we show the data to the parents react to it. I'm like, how many of you parents are worried about the job market? All of them raise their hand. How many of you guys are like on your kids because you're worried about it? All of them raise your hand. Like, how many of you know if your kids are actually worried? Oh, they don't care, they're apathetic. They're overwhelmed. At low levels of job market pessimism, it's positively associated with engagement. So the parenting practices that work only work when kids aren't worried about the job market. If they are worried about the job market, then those parenting practices become overbearing. And then we looked across parent education level and ethnicity, and I'm only going to show you the parent education level. So parents, we divided the sample with and without a college degree. For students whose parents have a college degree, that was the model. For parents who didn't have a college degree, job market pessimism wasn't even related to school engagement. And so I always think about the low-income family being really worried about the job market. No, it's the overbearing, college-educated parent that has particular ideas about what success looks like. And when their kids look apathetic, they're drilling in, linking education to their future and drilling in on educational outcomes. And so we have this really interesting interaction across education level. So in the end, it really is about developing the sense of a meaningful future, being future-oriented, and having this sense of purpose that's apart from what you want to be and what you're going to do. We are deeper and bigger people than what we do, and we need to communicate that to our adolescents. And their perceptions of the job market matter. And we don't really look at not just the realities of financial stress, but just really how they're perceiving the